3 a.m. election night. David Cameron should have been certain of victory. In fact, he was certain of nothing. Despite 5 years trying to make his party electable and the longest recession since the war, the Tory leader arrived at party HQ knowing he'd not done enough to secure victory.
It was a mixture of, obviously, you're exhausted because you've had an incredibly tough campaign. You're elated because the election's over, but just massively uncertain about what on earth is the next hours and next days going to bring. And yes, the sense that you might have come to the end of one thing, but you didn't have the certainty of knowing what the next thing was going to be. And it was a very strange sense, because nobody knew what was going to happen next.
We've been here since 10 o'clock yesterday evening, and no sign of any one party having a majority.
Before any new government could be formed, deals would have to be done.
We're not going to lose any more Conservative seats.
This is what you couldn't see on the night. David Cameron totting up the results. A day before, his team had agreed that if they got more than 300 seats, they could form a minority government.
So 306.
But now, he felt differently.
It was going to bed that night, or rather that morning, knowing we hadn't done enough to win outright, and starting to think through, well, what does this mean? What are the possibilities?
And 86.
The man who was the clear and unexpected loser of election night would now have to choose between Brown and Cameron.
This has obviously been a disappointing night for the Liberal Democrats. We simply haven't achieved what we had hoped. Very mixed emotions. I mean, from a desperate hankering to see my children, I hadn't seen for a while, desperate need for some sleep because I hadn't slept at all, and yeah, disappointment, real disappointment. But all along, a sort of a sense of, right, I've got to grit my teeth now, however tired I am, however disappointed I am that we didn't get the number of seats we wanted. There's a really big task at hand now. People deserve to know what we think, how we're going to approach this, try and do it as kind of consistently and as openly as possible.
That is precisely what David Cameron had decided to do. Labour predicted that he would claim victory and attack the squatter in Downing Street. What they didn't anticipate was this.
I want to make a big, open and comprehensive offer to the Liberal Democrats. I believe that we in the Conservative Party can give ground, both in the national interest and in the interest of forging an open and trusting partnership. I didn't think that we sort of did coalitions in Britain, but it's just on the morning of the election, waking up with the numbers as they were, the situation as bleak as it was for the country, it just seemed to me this is the right thing to do.
David Cameron was soon on the phone to Nick Clegg, on screen a reminder to express appreciation for how his opponent had handled himself and to agree how negotiations would now start.
The first face-to-face talks between the Conservatives and Lib Dems are expected to take place tonight.
The two leaders agreed to send 4 negotiators each to the Cabinet Office, just yards from Downing Street. In the days to come, Whitehall, a road normally the scene of dignified ceremonial, would be turned into a rolling scrum of cameras, reporters and bemused onlookers. The pressure on the men who David Cameron and Nick Clegg sent into this room in the Cabinet Office was immense. After all, they'd barely slept since the election. The room was said to be stiflingly hot. And just outside were waiting not just the Cabinet Secretary, but Her Majesty's Principal Private Secretary. The 4 men on each side of the table were left in no doubt as to what was expected of them. The markets were watching, and they wanted as full an agreement as possible, and they wanted it fast.
My advice to them, and of course we only facilitated, I want to get that absolutely clear, they discussed amongst themselves. I said that pace was important, but that it also, the more comprehensive the agreement, the better.
In other words, a coalition was preferable to a minority government, whose day-to-day survival could depend on Lib Dem votes. The Conservatives seemed to agree.
And it became fairly clear fairly rapidly that there were not only areas of policy agreement, but that the Conservative team were willing to make quite real concessions.
That suddenly, actually, we could form a coalition with these people, and they are acting rationally, and they too want to put the national interest first. So pretty soon it became clear that this wasn't just one of two options, it was actually the leading option.
I could see, actually, from quite early on, when they came together, the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, and they seemed to have a very high degree of trust with each other, that it was quite possible that it would evolve the way it did.
You could observe the rapport.
You could observe the body language, exactly.
The room they negotiated in looked out on the back of number 10.
If we had a break in the negotiations, George would say, look, we're only yards there from the windows of Downing Street. This is how close we are to being able to form the government. Gordon Brown is in there wondering what we're doing. And we have to make sure we are getting him out and providing a new government.
Hello, William, can you tell us how the talks have gone?
We've had an initial meeting, that's all there is to say about it at the moment.
And do you think you have the makings of a deal?
We've had an initial meeting, can't say more than that.
Day 2. A national commemoration will force the main actors in this plot together on a public stage. It's the 65th anniversary of VE Day. The three leaders set off for the Cenotaph for their first meeting since the last TV election debate.
You hopeful of a deal, Mr. Cameron?
David Cameron sensed he was making headway on a deal with the Lib Dems. Gordon Brown still believed he had the chance to gazump the Tories. And Nick Clegg knew whoever he chose, he would need his party's MPs and activists to vote for the deal. Publicly, all three said policy was what really mattered. Privately, personality would prove crucial.
I understand that relations between Clegg and Gordon Brown were never very good. Whereas, of course, with David Cameron, I mean, they're not quite two peas in a pod, but they come from very similar backgrounds. Public school education, Oxbridge, relatively affluent backgrounds.
Good evening, sir.
Evening.
But David Cameron stayed put. He had an important date that night. The Tory leader went into a back entrance at Party HQ and then gave the media the slip.
We saw David Cameron arrive, I counted him in, I haven't been able to count him out. So the assumption has to be that he did go out of this building some other way, and who knows where he's gone.
Nick Clegg, are you any closer to a deal? Where am I going?
No one was meant to know where he was going.
There was a bit of sort of jumping in one car and another. We eventually met in Admiralty House, in a room which felt, yes, very cloak and dagger. The curtains were drawn.
A building which had witnessed many historic meetings was now the scene of the first between two men forging Britain's first coalition for more than 60 years. David Cameron and Nick Clegg decided they wanted to meet alone, so they swept past these great scenes of former naval battles, leaving behind them in the hall their party advisors and the civil servants who'd come here to offer support, and made their way into this small room, leaving behind people to wonder anxiously how they were getting on. Perhaps what they realised is that the key to any negotiation, the key to any deal between them, was simple: personal chemistry. Did you at that meeting have a feeling, because you were on your own, was that a moment you thought, I tell you what, I could share government with this guy?
Oh, I think by that stage I was thinking that things like that would be possible. We hadn't got by that stage, hadn't got anywhere near details or who would work and how and all of that. But definitely the relationship was good. We were getting on.
No, I remember thinking, yeah, this might lead further than I might otherwise have imagined it could do. And I think we probably both surprised each other to the degree to which we both appreciated that we were in a totally new situation and we needed to be flexible and open and pragmatic about seeing what would happen next.
You sense, maybe I was saying exactly the same to the other guy, I don't know. But it felt as if this was beginning to click into place.